Hello everyone, it's Pastor Ian here with another one of your daily briefings. Today we're actually going to be shifting from the Old Testament and the book of Joshua to 1 Thessalonians. So before we were in the Old Testament, but now we're going to be in the New Testament. So starting off, 1 Thessalonians is a book written by the Apostle Paul to a church in Thessalonica. And in the first chapter we see that Paul identifies how this church has something special and distinct about them. How he can tell that God has, what he said, has chosen these people with love because of what they actually have done. And what he does is he basically says that, if we look and we see based off of the results of their transformation, the results of their life changing from what they used to be to what they are, that we actually can see growth, development, and change, transformation, not because people just chose to do different things, but they can actually see the Holy Spirit at work in their lives. He says that we can tell that God has chosen you because there is this powerful shift between the way that they were and the way that they are now. There's this shift away from following idols to following Jesus. And Paul says that it's so extreme that they're actually models to all the other churches in the area. That in some way that God has chosen them and it's visible to see. And I guess what I want to talk about today is about that idea of transformation and that idea that it's possible for people to go from worshiping idols to worshiping Christ, and that somehow is an indicator of a person's personal life. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to do good deeds and that will be some way of saving you. That's not what Paul is doing here. What Paul is doing is he's saying, because I can see these things, I know that the Holy Spirit has come into your life and has transformed you, and it's visible for everyone to see. There's this idea that the Holy Spirit coming into our lives, it doesn't happen in a vacuum, as if, one day I'm wearing a blue shirt and then the next day I'm wearing a red shirt, but other than that, nothing really changes. There's this idea that the Holy Spirit actually changes a person once he enters their life, once he enters their heart. And for us, it can sometimes be a challenge to see that, especially when we've been following Jesus for so long, especially when we've been raised in a Christian home for so long, and we just kind of assumed that, we were believers, that we were Christian people, even if we weren't. But what's clear here is that the mark of this church is that the natural response of their heart to God's message, to seeing Paul witness to them through his life, that it was change. And change isn't always a bad thing. Change can be a good thing, and oftentimes it is a good thing. But the idea is that it's not led by people. It's led by the Holy Spirit. Because when I was younger, I thought, okay, if I'm a believer, that means I have to do the right thing, not the wrong thing. I have to change how I live so that way I'm, showing that I'm a good Christian person. And I had a mentor of mine who criticized me for it and said, no, don't do that. Don't do that. That's not the right way of thinking. If you think that the way that you actually grow in your Christian life is to just change all the bad things and say, I'm going to fix all of it myself, you're really not actually following the Spirit's guidance. That you're not actually allowing the Holy Spirit to do the changing for you, to rely on Him to do the hard work. Now, that doesn't mean you just sit down and you wait for the Holy Spirit to do His thing and then you can, decide to go around and change things. But it means to be prayerfully looking after the Holy Spirit, to be waiting for His leading and His timing and His direction. And to actually do the hard work of change. Because the hope is that one day people will look at us in the same way they looked at the Thessalonica church, where they say, wow, you are a model for the way that people are to live. And that's our hope too. That people would be able to see Christ in our lives, in our actions, and that they would see that there is something distinct about them, that they're not just like the rest, that there's something special.